I do that quite a lot. I've noticed there's a couple of podcasts where I just go and put my hands up. I don't know if I'm shocked that we've managed to go live, Colin, but we are live right now and have been live for
It's
about
episode
15
75. You really shouldn't be shocked that we
minutes.
can actually do it.
Good evening and welcome to episode. I did it again. Look, good evening and welcome to episode 75 of the Brewgaders Dynamic Duo Beer Comics and crap intros to podcasts. Thank you for joining us. Always, I changed the ticker at the bottom of the page so it actually tells you to like and share and subscribe all the time now. So I've been looking at our insight. There's a thing called insights, and if you like the podcast or share the podcast, it makes our insights look really good, and other people get to see us. So if you enjoy the show, just do that. We have got an amazing guest this week. As you can see here, special guest Mark Abnett of Aroha Comics. I've been trying to say Aroha quite a lot this week, just so I can get used to it coming out of my mouth. He's going to talk to us about his current Kickstarter and This Land. And then in about 40 minutes' time, we're going to be joined by our friend Andrew McGee of Kingdom Comics, who's going to take part in a new feature, which we'll come to later on. But
So tonight, our second New Zealand guest.
I know.
After Brendan Wright.
It's a tough act to follow, Mark. I hope you're ready. Well, please welcome Mr. Mark Abnett.
Hey guys, second New Zealander. Second.
Yeah.
Oh, kia ora.
Kia ora,
Well,
yes.
We had Brendan Wright of the 77.
Yes, I actually we've been messaging each other.
There's two of us.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I am very good in sunny Scotland, as you two. So I'm in the south. I'm a Kiwi living with a South African in the south of Scotland. And it is a balmy 3 degrees and it's freezing cold, bone-chilling, skin-piercing rain outside at the moment. And I'm in a lovely conservatory because you know what's a good idea is to build a conservatory in Scotland. It's great.
Yeah, I don't know why they're popular. I really aren't. I have no idea for our 2 days of sunshine that we get. Anyway, Mark, you have been living in this country a wee while. You've started to make your mark, pardon the pun, in the indie comics industry. But this week, just launching your first Kickstarter. So tell us about it.
Right. So I was lucky enough. I've been here since 2010. So I am a British citizen now. Back in 2016, lucky enough to win the other fellow Scott, Mark Miller, did a Miller World Talent Contest. And I was stumbled into winning the Hit Girl story. So that got published by Image Comics, and that was good fun. And then I thought, oh, this comic stuff's easy, isn't it? Oh, this is brilliant. I'm going to make heaps of money and be famous and all sorts. And no, that's not how it works. So what I did over the next couple of years is I actually went to heaps of conventions. I think one of the first ones was probably the 9 panels at Glasgow Con that I would have met you, probably Colin, for the first time. And most of the really good conventions around the UK have trade days, basically. And it's sort of, you have all these really specific panels about writing and craft and everything. And I spent the next couple of years going up and down the country, basically hanging out, getting drunk with comic creators and learning off them. So an idea was spiraling in my head, and everyone said, what you've got to do, you've got to start off small, keep doing those short stories and pitching to annuals and stuff like that. And so I listened to them and did the opposite. And I saved up a whole lot of money and created a book and story called This Land. And This Land is essentially a future New Zealand where everyone has been gifted with the power of the gods. And then one of the gods returns and he's not too happy with what he's found. And basically the story was, they say, write what you know. And again, this is kind of asked backwards because what happened around the time I was looking to create something, there was an earthquake in the South Island of New Zealand. And instead of everything falling into the ocean and falling down, the seabed around the township of Kaikoura raised about 5 meters. So there's all these great photos of all these geologists and stuff standing with the seabed just up above them and all this sea life and seaweed and stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of it perished. They managed to get out there and saved a lot, but it was absolutely crazy. And then about the same time, there was a news report on BBC talking about the 8th undiscovered continent, which was the sea shelf around New Zealand. So New Zealand actually has a fault line running right through it. They call it Pacific Rim, right? All the way from San Francisco through Japan, through California, and all the way around and straight down the middle of New Zealand is the Pacific Rim. And around the shelf, the sea shelf around New Zealand, it's apparently one of the lowest in the world. So they're saying that used to be the continent of Zealandia, which Zealandia and New Zealand, that's a Dutch term. So we prefer to it being known as Te Rui Maui, which is the land of Maui. So then all these ideas start percolating. And then at the same time, I'm going for my citizenship test. And you get an app on your phone, you get about 1,000 questions. So in between meetings and stuff, I'm doing the practice tests on my phone. And I realized I knew a lot of that stuff. And then I'd take it to go to see customers and say, hey, try this. They'd all fail. No one knew their history. And then I was like, hang on a minute. If I was to be in New Zealand, I don't know my history either. It's so weird because in the New Zealand, we grew up on BBC One was essentially our TV One, right? We were a very ingrained colony. Most of our history, I didn't learn New Zealand history until it was an elective when in the last year of high school, which is like, that's weird. Why that shouldn't it be taught to 13 and 14-year-olds? But at the same point, the same sort of happens here as well. You know, the history actually comes later. It's not drilled in. I think after that experience, I think every British citizen, and in fact, every New Zealand citizen should take their country's citizenship tests, which they require other people to do. And you'd be shocked at what you do and don't know. It's incredible. My saving grace is I knew Monty Python inside and out, and I knew David Hume was a philosopher from Bruce's Drinking Philosopher's Song. That was one of the questions. David Hume is A, philosopher, B, philanthropist. And I was like, Monty Python, got it. And that helped me get my citizenship test, which is crazy. So long story short, I've just launched a Kickstarter on the 1st of February, and we're already at 89%, which is fantastic. Ooh. And the first issue of this land is, where is it? It's already done. Oof. In fact, all 5 issues are actually completely drawn, which is fantastic. And the funds raised from this Kickstarter will go to letters for 2 and colours for 3. And then in 2 more months, I'm going to release 2, and that will pay for colours and letters for 4 and letters for 3, and then so on and so on. So the whole story, the art's completely done. So there's and that was one thing I really wanted to make sure of, because we've all backed Kickstarters before in the past, and stuff turns up, and some stuff doesn't. So unknown creator, are you going to trust this guy unless you know the story's done? You know, are we going to see an issue come out and then have to wait 10 years, or is he going to disappear and we're never going to see him again? So it was important to me that we got the point. The artist is being paid as well. Everyone's being paid up front for their work, which is fantastic. Of course, COVID happened. And the last 12 months have been a bit funny. So that's why I'm on Kickstarter. And I've got to be honest, I wish I'd done it sooner, because it's just blowing me away. You know, the love and the interest from people all around the world has been fantastic. I did launch a version of this land at Glasgow Comic-Con in 2019, and we used it. We did a very small print run. We used it it was more like R&D, because this is it's a New Zealand story, but how would people from this side of the world enjoy it? And at the end of the day, it is a bit of a hero's journey and a quest. There's also there's the Māori languages in there, and which is actually, some people can get scared when they see new languages and stuff. It's not I don't hammer it over their heads. And it's sort of like, well, when you read Lord of the Rings, that's got Elvish, right? When you read Asterix was my classic example. There's Latin. The old pirate says Latin cursing in the Asterix books. And I knew Asterix before. I knew Latin words before I knew Te Reo Maori words. And Te Reo is the Maori language. So I thought, well, that's bizarre. So how can I create a book for New Zealanders and people worldwide to see the New Zealand language and a bit and a adaptation of some of the myths and legends, and get that into people's hands, and you see the success of something like Moana, which they did a really good job with that. It was apart from there was a Maui costume where it was it's a case of the not understanding that the tattoos actually have meaning, and they made this Maui costume with all his tattoos printed on it, and there was a bit of an uproar for that, which is fair enough, because you wouldn't do a rock costume with rocks tattoos on it, sort of thing. So that got canned. But overall, the understanding and the respect for the Polynesians and the societies involved in Moana was really well done. And what we've done here with this land is every design element has had input from whakapapa, which in New Zealand that means people of the land. So classic example is we've got the logo here. The background pattern is called a kowhaiwhai pattern, and that was done from a Maori guy from the East Coast, Hikarea Mālora. And also there's a tribal design. So every tribe in this New Zealand, Te Reo Maui, they've developed powers and abilities from those areas. And there's the page. Look at that. So all the tribes had logo designs done by Seb Wikaraka Penny. And then also the translation isn't as simple as me just going online and figuring out what words to say. It was run past a translator called Trent Brown Marsh. So everywhere we've had guidance. PR. We had guidance and all the development stuff. And unfortunately, when it came to finding an artist who was available from New Zealand, well, most New Zealand artists couldn't commit to something spread over such a long time. And all the really amazing Kiwi artists. You've got Roger Landridge, who lives in New Zealand. And lives in the UK at the moment. You've got a couple of guys. All the really good New Zealand artists are basically working for Peter Jackson. They're all working at Weta Workshop. So my schedule and theirs didn't quite add up. But I managed to get Pierre Dedelis from Poland to do all the ink work and all the pencil and inks. And he's been fantastic and so flexible. The guy works on 7 books. So he's done there's another couple of books he's done. He's done a book called Wordsmith for Stephen Cock out of Australia. He's done a book, Ella Uncharted. Ella, I might say that on the, I can't even see.
So you got Wordsmith by Stigmate Studio, Team Synergy from HB Comics. And many more. Yeah.
Many more. Yeah, many more. There you go. But yeah, he's just been a machine. So he's been very, very good to work with. And when you make comics and you send a script off and you've got the vision in your mind's eye. And then when those pages start coming back and you're like, holy crap, that's exactly what I saw. Oh, holy crap, that's even better than what I imagined. And there wasn't a single page that we had to redraw or relook at. It was just absolutely brilliant. It's been, the whole experience has been amazing. You've got Liza Buenaventura who does colours. She's been working for people like Zenoscope and Dynamite and a whole lot of other place. And then you got Hass, who most people know. He's getting quite prolific in his lettering now. A lot of image stuff, a lot of Dynamite stuff. And of course,
I think his name from it. He did. I think he was a letterer on the more recent Peter Cannon stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was amazing. His work on that was incredible. Yeah. And obviously, he's the publisher of Panel by Panel, the comics critique magazine, which is absolutely brilliant. So the team overall has been fantastic. Verona is a close friend of mine. She was more of a guidance, we would call it. So she's someone I went to university with, and we did media arts, and she ended up in journalism and down in politics down in Wellington, in the capital of New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I took my public relations and advertising degree, and I ended up in the UK selling beer, running pubs and then selling beer to everyone. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey to get to this point. It's crazy.
Mark, you mentioned Peter Jackson and, of course, Lord of the Rings earlier. Now, something that fans of Lord of the Rings love is the maps that you get of, Middle Earth. And yeah. I noticed that you have a map for your comic.
Yeah, everyone loves a good map. So that's actually, for everyone watching, that's actually one of the stretch goals for the Kickstarter, is we're going to get the map printed and given to everyone. But I'll reveal that at another time. As in, I haven't quite figured it out yet. But yeah, the map was really good fun to do, and a couple of really cool things happened with it. So if you go online and you look up Zealandia, Lost Continent, there's an outline of what they suspect. This is sort of what they've mapped out as the sea shelf to sort of look like. Now, in Maori legend, the North Island of the New Zealand, I don't know if you remember Moana, but so Maui is a constant throughout the Pacific, right? Mm-hmm. The legend is a little bit different in each culture, but he's one of the constants throughout. And the North Island of New Zealand is a fish that he pulled up. The South Island of New Zealand is the canoe that him and his brothers were fishing in. Now, really interesting thing about the fish, the North Island of New Zealand looks like a shape of a stingray. The stingray tail coming up the top, and the fins in the side and to the bottom. And when I was looking into Zealandia or Taruia Maui, there's a couple of really cool coincidences happen. So first of all, that shape appeared, and it looked very much like a handprint. So a lot of the old Māori gods, Maui, for example, was supposed to have perished as he tried to enter the underworld. I don't want to get. There's a couple of versions, but one of the versions is he was trying to give man immortality, and to do that, he had to go through the goddess of death. So to have immortal life, he was basically going to reverse the life cycle by going through the goddess of death. So babies come out. Maui was trying to go back through the goddess of death, up the. Basically, it says her obsidian jawed vagina.
I'm enjoying you trying to explain it, because
yeah.
my first degree is in religious studies, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm like, oh, let's see that.
So that's something we kind of we figure out a way to tell that in the comic mm-hmm. without talking about the obsidian jawed vagina. But the and part of that is and he died. She got woken by a laughing bird and snap shut, and Maui was dead in the well, I won't call them myths, they're legends, because they're stories that have been passed on, right? We don't call them myths in New Zealand because they all happen. And one of the really interesting things about and the Māori underworld is the way this Taruia Maui, this Zealandia, this new continent looked like a handprint, not unlike my logo, which is actually another connection, but that I just figured out right now. So this handprint was almost like, it was like saying to me, so what if something happened to New Zealand, something happened to the gravity of the planet? Let's say the moon broke and the gods who were buried beneath pushed out. And there's the handprint of Taruia Maui. And that the ball just started really running from there. And what was really interesting is, I said, as the landmass changed, and then all the ancient godly energies were released, changing the people of the land, and they would develop abilities and powers based on the different areas of the land in different regions. So New Zealand's quite a varied landscape, Lord of the Rings. So you've got your great, the Southern Alps and the South Island. You've got your Tongariro volcanoes. Auckland, for example, has 100 dormant volcanoes. And what if they all went up at once? What happened then? So the people from Auckland, for example, developed the ability to manipulate heat and lava. Notwithstanding, 3/4 of the population perished in the big event. But and one of the many things that I thought, well, what are we going to call this event? We'll call the event the Fever. This is when everyone changed and became something else. And quite ironically, not ironically, factually, a fever is a name for a group of stingrays, and that's like kismet. So the North Island looked like a stingray. This handprint comes up. Everyone changes, and I said, "Oh yeah, it's a fever," and it's the same thing as instead of one stingray, you've got multiple stingrays coming out these tails of the handprint. And it was just all these little coincidences kept on happening, and I just knew I was on the right track with the story. So yeah, it's crazy stuff. So the map has been, I'm sort of going around in circles here. Yeah. The creation of the map and the world building, all that happened. All the world building, all the development happened over the course of a couple of years before I locked in the story. The first draft and the last draft are just so different, but I'm so glad I took my time doing it, because you end up, everything makes sense. All the ducks in a row, and I can tell you what beer they drink and what grass grows over here and what happened to the cows. And it's just crazy. I've got 140 files sitting on I've got Evernote on my phone, and it's amazing how the whole thing's developed and worked in so well. So yeah, there's so much potential in this land for future stories as well. It's batshit.
Wow. We had Alex on this time last year, and he said the same when I asked him about world building and about this whole. It has to make sense to you, because obviously you're asking people to pick up, that are going to pick up and read the story to believe in the world. So the fact that you've put that much commitment into it can't be a bad thing.
It's one of those things that at the start I thought, was it really necessary to do that? But if you don't, and then you start looking at guys. I'm a big fan of people like Kieran Gillen and who's on the X-Men at the moment? Hickman. I went full Hickman on it. That's what I say. Because if you look at some of his stuff and his Fantastic Four and his Secret Warriors, all the way through his Avengers, and now in his X-Men stuff and his maps and data sheets and all that sort of stuff. It's beautiful. It just adds to the world building. He does it with Hickman does it in his book East of West as well. And the more no one will ever see all this stuff, right? But to have it there, to have the lore there, it just gives me stuff to build on. And I had to be especially careful because I'm Pakeha. I'm a white-born New Zealander. I am not whakapapa. I don't have ancestry from New Zealand. So when I was working with people, I made sure that everything made sense, and the reasoning behind everything is correct and right. So there is no disrespect to anyone of any tribe or iwi or background in New Zealand. And there's a lot of thinking about what would the ideal New Zealand look like in the future for me. What could it have been, and what could it become? And having Te Reo Māori, the Māori language, a big part of the book, isn't about, look at me, I'm showing, it's not a PC thing. It's like, no, this will happen. That language will become, because in the early 20th century in New Zealand, the kids weren't allowed to speak Māori at school. They got beaten if they spoke Māori in the playground and stuff. And for about 2 generations, the language was almost beaten out of them. And you could say the same for the Irish and the Scots as well in certain areas, and many other colonies to be honest. Yeah. And for me, Te Reo and a mixture of Te Reo and English in the future would be an ideal way forward. Because it actually, I think at the time, and even when you're living when you're away from home, you see things differently, and you don't realize the value of it. And when I say value, I don't mean in a monetary fashion. I mean in a mana or pride. So mana, not the card game dealing points mana, but actual pride and integrity and knowledge of self. Te reo in the Maori language brings a lot to the identity of New Zealanders, even if a lot of them don't realise that at the moment. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's my heavy hat. But I mean, if you look at we talk about Saltire, that that is a brilliant example of a Scottish comic that does not bang you over the head in, I want to say, Gaelic. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
No? Yeah, right. Okay. Because I get confused because Gaelic to me seems like it should be Irish, but it's actually Scottish, right?
Yeah. Is it not? There's Gaelic and Gaelic.
Gaelic. Oh, right. Yeah.
No, I'm not. But don't quote me on that. That piece of knowledge was I was teaching a class today, and I overheard one of my first years in his first year Scots lesson being told that you have Gaelic and Gaelic, and they're slightly different because. So yeah, I might be wrong.
But it's important, and I mean, a lot of people go. Any language that's native to a country should be held in the highest respect, and this is, again, do not hammer people over the head with it. And the book, at the start of the book, I do say, hey, there's some words in here you may not know how to pronounce. Go to the Maori dictionary online and you'll be able to hear those words spoken. For years, I remember reading books as a kid, and for years reading certain words, never actually questioning how they sounded, thinking in my head they sounded one way, and then you get to a certain age and you're like, oh shit, I've spent you don't know till you hear these words how they should sound and feel. Yeah. So it was important to me that asset is there for people to delve into if they want to go further. They don't have to. There's no rules here, but it's making sure things are done the right way.
Yeah, and I suppose it could provide a bit of a gateway into people looking a little bit more at their history as well.
Absolutely, yeah. It's something. The most important thing about me for the book is it offers a look into the past, but it's still a completely new world with completely new rules, but they are proud of elements of the past and traditions. So yeah, there's little things, and there's stuff that gets explained as the book goes on. So I get every now and then someone will say, well, why did you do that? And I said, I cannot tell you. You have to keep reading. It's one of those things, and it's not a cop-out, but everything that may be questioned is explained. So
it just sounds like you've really planned this out over a long space. It's like, you've got to create a Star Wars visual dictionary for your book, with all these characters and places and stuff. You've obviously kind of created a lot of that stuff already, and if it doesn't exist on paper, it's up here. That's an important thing when you're particularly doing a series that's going to last you a few issues, is that you do have a consistent set of rules, a consistent environment. If you've got things like magic or superpowers, they've got to have a consistency there, so that you're not suddenly just pulling a rabbit out of a hat in issue 3 that changes everything.
Yeah, there's one thing that I really want to tell people. I really want to tell. It's kind of a soft reveal, because it's very important to the character, but the way it's revealed is just that's just the way it is. I can't say exactly what it is, but you won't see that till the last page of issue 4. You might get an idea. No, was it the last page?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Maybe 4th page of issue 5. Actually, yes, 4th page of issue 5. It'll just go, yeah, that's because of that. All right, and everyone moves on.
It's amazing.
I really want to tell you, it's just
amazing that you're that far ahead. I'm writing issue 3 of my comic, and I can't tell you what happens on any of the pages, and it's almost finished.
But that's the thing. I mean, guys, I was told, I was lucky enough to be in a position where I could have, at the time, I thought I was going to fund this whole thing myself, get the whole package together, and then go off to Image Comics or something like that. But it's actually not the right move for me or this book. The right move for me or this book is to get done, get it out to people, and get people talking about it. And then from there, who knows? There's been some interest from... am I legally allowed to say this? There's some interest in other areas that may be looking at this at the moment.
We had guests on a couple of months ago who had interest from another, and they were trying to explain it to us as we've had interest from a popular subscriber-based streaming movie service to work on the series. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, my connections with Mark Miller don't run that deep, but I wish. But there's plenty afoot, which is nice. But that's not why we do these things. If your goal is to go out and say this comic's going to be a movie or a TV series, it's not going to work. It's got to be a good comic first. And I've had some pretty good reviews from people who've only seen the first issue. And they've all said they want to see more. I think what really surprised me is the market for it. So we did a couple of cons in 2019. We did Lakes, we did Glasgow, we did MCM Glasgow. Did I do another one? It's all a blur. I've been to a lot of conventions. Remember conventions? They were great.
It was MCM Glasgow that I you, Mark. I think that was the last time.
That would have been it. But the amount of young women, and I think 70% of the people who bought our books were women, which I should have realised, but I didn't. It was really the best thing about conventions is when someone buys the 2-day ones. Someone buys a book off you on a Saturday and then comes back on a Sunday with someone else. Say, hey, you've got to get this one.
Oh, nice.
That sort of stuff really just blows you away. So we had a bit of that going on, which was really good. So, so this land, all 5 issues are out this year. Touch wood. But only if people back them one by one. You can't wait to the end because it might mean we're not going to get over the hurdle. So don't sit on it. You got to keep pushing it through. So, yeah. And I've got another book as well, but we'll talk about that in October.
Amazing.
Yeah. We'll see then.
That's absolutely. So we're going to bring on Andrew really, really soon. But I would like to chat to you about what's exciting about having you on, as well as having a really awesome comic. Is the fact that you actually drink beer.
I do.
It's good. Our guests, our guests next week that I'm really excited about are the beer advocacy group, Beers Without Beards, and I'm really excited to have them. We're really excited to have them back on next week. I interviewed Emily about a year and a half ago, and we had that conversation about beer. That was great. And then I was like, "So comics?" And she was like, "Yeah, I don't read anything." That was the first and last time that I'd asked that question on air. Normally we would go, if we have a comic guest on before we go to air, we go, "Do you drink beer?" And vice versa. If we've got a brewery on or something, we're like, "You read comics, yeah?" And if they don't, then we just don't talk about them. But you do both. So.
Yeah, so I've been in the beer industry since I'd say actually since I was 16, if I'm going to be honest. Behind the bar at the rugby club back over in New Zealand when I was underage. Drinking age in New Zealand was, when I was working behind the bar, the drinking age was 21. So I probably shouldn't have been working behind the bar. I definitely should not have been working behind the bar, actually. That's fact. But rugby clubs are rugby clubs. And that's always an eye-opener. Working in a place like that when you're a young man and you think, maybe adults don't know anything. Yeah, you learn that pretty quickly, seeing drunk old guys stumbling around. I did a Bachelor of Media Arts, majoring in public relations and advertising, and my first role straight out of there was a merchandiser's role for Lion Breweries in New Zealand, which is New Zealand's biggest brewer. And then about a year into that, I became a regional sales manager at the age of 22. I think I was pretty young. Regional sales manager for the Coromandel area, which is all
I've been there. Spent an
Aha.
Easter at the Coromandel Peninsula. Yeah, lovely.
Amazing. There's basically Coromandel Peninsula is one of the pointy bits that comes out of the top of the North Island. It's a small pointy bit. And it's basically got one ring road that goes all the way around. And I did that for 5 years, just round and round and round in the windy, very tight single lane roads. So that was good fun, and selling lots of beer there and meeting lots of publicans. And then I became a brand manager for Lion for a couple of years. And then I think the first recession hit, 2008, 2009.
Yeah, it was 8.
Yeah. And I'd been there 8 years at that point, and I was like, I know, I'll take my redundancy and I'll go see the world. And I took my redundancy and I got as far as Australia. And then came back and worked for Coca-Cola for a couple of years selling beer for them, believe it or not. Coca-Cola New Zealand was selling beer. And then I got on a plane and I turned 30. Everyone's getting married and having kids. Right, I'm out of here. And I went to Vancouver Island and lived in Victoria and in Canada. And ended up being manager of a bar there called the Shark Club, which is basically a classy Hooters, if we're going to be honest. Yep, that was an interesting time. And then I came over to the UK and I ran a pub just by Twickenham in London. Lived in a flat with 15 other Kiwis for a couple of months. And then Shark Club decided to open up in Newcastle. So I hopped on an overnight bus and went up to Newcastle and opposite St. James Park, helped open and run and recruit something like 200 staff. At least it was 100 between kitchen and front of house for Shark Club. And it was when we got that up and running, I was a bar manager, and it was about a 750 barrel account, which is nothing to sneeze at. In the first year, 750 barrels. So a 50-litre keg, you're talking about 1132. You're looking maybe about 1,500 kegs a year.
Wow.
50 litres. So probably more. I probably got my maths wrong there. But yeah, it was
got a lot of beer.
Yeah, and it was it was an experience. And then I ended up got a bit sick of doing 70-hour weeks for someone else, and didn't realize, because by the time I came here, I didn't realize I'd signed a contract for, I think it was like 18 grand a year to work 70 hours a week. Nah. And living in Newcastle, I thought I didn't know what was worth what. I was so stupid. And I signed a dumb contract, and they got a lot out of me. So I ended up getting a role with a brewery, and I've been with a brewery ever since. So it's been interesting looking after south of Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway, and Lanarkshire. So that's about 1,000 miles a week.
How does working for larger companies affect your palate for beer?
So the company I work for, there's no point mentioning it, but they sell a lot of craft beers as well, and it's the area. If you're in a lot of the craft beers are still, the way they've done it, a lot of the craft beers are still owned by, the brands are owned by the original brand owners, the people who start up these small breweries. They've just brought the distribution rights. So there was an example, Brewdog took one of the brands off their menu because this craft beer company had sold the distribution rights to my big company, which isn't actually quite fair, because they were still the same people doing the same thing on the same ethos. They just signed a distribution deal.
Yeah.
So, it was just so, because they'd reached their peak growth in their area and they just needed to get into more hands. Otherwise, they just flatlined. So yeah, Brewdog's a bit weird like that, but I'm a big fan of them as well, and I've got shares in them. So there you go. But as far as palate goes, it's really interesting. It's really challenging because when it comes to beer and people, a lot of it is very subjective. You know, there's those guys who will drink Tennent's and Carling and Foster's all their life and swear by it. And there will people who will put their nose up at it and say, not for me. I think it's off air earlier, Stella Artois. Premium beer everywhere in the world except the UK. And half of that is branding and how it was sold here. It was the first 5% lager in the UK in the late 80s and early 90s. And it ended up, everyone was drinking your 3.5%, your Belhaven Bests and your John Smiths and your ales. And then this 5% beer comes out of nowhere and bang, everyone's drinking the same space with a higher octane beer, which resulted in the technical term, I believe, of wife beater, which Stella Artois is tarred with in the UK. But everywhere else around the world, it's a premiumable session beer, good with meals, good with seafood, you know. Here, it's got no respect because it's ingrained in people to think certain ways. So beer overall is completely subjective. I don't hold it against people who only like their Tennent's. That's fine. That's great. But the way people drink alcohol in the UK is completely different than anywhere else. And New Zealand, Australia are probably a little bit similar. I believe last time I was there, it's certainly evolved. There's certainly a lot more craft beers and craft bars in New Zealand, Australia. But the booze barns that are here, the old workman clubs and, you know, the older pubs that just have the 4 beers on tap and the 4 old guys just sit at the end of the bar, unfortunately, and especially with COVID and lockdown and stuff, they need to change and evolve. And people's palates will have evolved over the last year or so as well. You guys are probably drinking more craft beer at home than you would have if you've actually been allowed to be out and about. Would that be true, or I don't know?
We're snobs, but yeah.
But yeah, so it's all about there is nothing wrong with appreciating good beer, but it's when people, especially the nothing a mainstream lager does a certain thing for a certain person. But if you're drinking good beer and having good food and you're understanding it, that's a great thing to have as well. And we're slowly getting there in the UK. You know, younger people are drinking less and less, but they're paying more for an experience, more a premium product. You know, whether it's tell you what goes down a storm, your bloody espresso martinis, 15 quid a pop. You know, it's crazy. They'll pay 15 quid a pop for an espresso martini, which at its base cost is probably about 3 quid.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy, absolutely crazy. But they're having an experience, you know, and there's a balance of beer snobs, and there's nothing wrong with being a beer snob. There's nothing wrong with being a straight lager man. You can whatever you like is okay, but you shouldn't probably put everyone else in a especially if you're working in a craft beer bar. You do not want the staff should never be beer snobs. Should be beer educators. It's all about teaching people and offering them a different experience and a good experience. So, for example, I only drink, not me, but Joe, let's say Joe only drinks Tennent's lager. Well, Joe, you've come into this is quite funny. Joe walks into a bar in West Glasgow, the West End, right? So there's no Tennent's lager. You've got 10 taps. 8 of them are craft beers that he's never heard of before. And then you've got something like maybe an Amstel and a Burr Moretti, which he gets overseas when he goes somewhere. Yeah. He walks in, he says, oh, what's good here? Now, the barman, if they're educated, will ask Joe what he drinks. I say, well, I like a lager. He probably won't point them to, I like a Tennent's lager. He probably won't point them to Moretti or Amstel first. He might point them to, let's say, Brewdog lager. Oh God, it escapes me. But you know, you want to match someone's palate and start them off softly and give them a soft beer experience first, if it's challenging for them. 9 times out of 10, unfortunately, some of these craft beer places still don't have the staff that are that educated, and they'll just tell them the one that's the most they sell the most of. So let's say Joker IPA, for example. It's still pretty popular, yeah, and it turns over real quick. You know, so he'll drink Joker IPA, but he hasn't got a palate for Joker IPA, right? He'll sit there, chew on it, go, yeah, all right, I'll have an Amstel, please. He'll probably have half that pint, put it down, and then sit on Amstel for the rest of the night. So even though it's supposed to be a craft beer bar, they're still doing really well out of their Moretti's and Amstels, and because the staff haven't given people the right choices to develop their palate, you know. So that's why you see still on bars that swear they're craft beer through and through, they'll still have a mainstream premium. Most of them will, you know. And it might be Estrella, it might be, I'm not going to say heavily because that's not, but you know what I'm saying. There's, we're not talking Foster's or Carling or Tennant's. We're talking about the next sort of premiumized level up there, a continental European lager that they're familiar with when they've been overseas. So that's an easy buy for them. But the biggest problem with a lot of craft bars is the turnover, because you need to be going through a keg once opened and stored correctly should be gone within a week. All right, 4 days. We're being perfectly honest. And with the newer craft beer bars, they have better cellars. But the old pubs that convert into craft beer bars, they don't have refrigerated cellars. They've got, and this is a huge problem in the UK. Well, the first pub that I worked in the UK was below the river level of the River Thames, and all the craft kegs were sitting in still water about an inch deep. There were, I swear to God, you had to wear gumboots to go into that cellar. It was the most, and they'd hang a beast in the corner. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. And these old pubs are not regulated to be up to date with proper cellar cooling and conditioning, because every pub in Scotland, in the UK, 4 out of 5 would close down overnight because they haven't slowly developed these systems of maintaining and keeping a better quality beer. Brand new spec builds, certainly most of them have proper your polystyrene, the food chillers, the walk-in food chillers now must be to a certain standard. But beer's a food. Beer does not have to be at a certain standard. It should be, but it is not looked at as the same standard as food in the rest of the UK. As I say, the new builds, the newest places that get fitted out, absolutely. The proper stainless steel line chillers, wood's a big bugbear of mine. Wood and food kept in a cellar shouldn't happen. Here's this good saying. I remember this one because it was a bit of a laugh when I first heard it. Back in New Zealand, a customer complained that his beer had gone off and he wanted a refund. So the technician went in and had a look, and he wrote out his form, and there was lime sitting in the cellar and a bit of meat and all sorts of stuff, and there was a meat raffle pack, and he had wooden shelves, and the wooden shelves had been sitting there for 20 years. And then we went back to him and said, the microbiological integrity of the cellar is compromised, and we will not be giving you a refund, because if wood gets wet or soaks up anything, stuff can breathe and breed and live in there. Needs a proper cellar. Should probably either have a complete, like a walk-in cellar as a kitchen does, should be completely sealed, metal everywhere, no wood, maybe a concrete floor. I mean, I even object to a concrete floor from being, to be honest, it should be a stainless steel floor. Everything should be at least 2 inches off the floor on racks, at least. And then so you can clean out underneath. But I reckon you could go to any cellar in the UK right now, and 98% of them. And that's where you get a lot of beer waste as well. Because if the cellars, the amount of times you've seen people pour a beer and then, oh, no, that's not right, and they're tipping it out and they're mucking about when in between changing kegs, the amount of wastage and money they pour down the drain, it doesn't just affect. Why would retailers want to sell and improve their beer if they're tipping half of it out? So there's a lot of that as well. Is the conditioning and the presentation of beer in this country is really bad. Overall, really bad. Those who do it well do it really well. And It's usually the younger guys getting into the industry, you know.
That's all when you make change, isn't it? And it's the bit that change in the
it is,
or a lot of them will make very change.
It's about offering, you know, people want to go out and be entertained and educated, and instead of just going out, and there's nothing wrong with going out and getting on the lash with the boys, right, and having a few drinks and a laugh, but at the same time, it's bloody expensive. It's cheaper to fly to Spain for the weekend or to spend a night in Glasgow. You know, well, it was. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 6 months? But it's cheaper to jump on a plane and pop over to Europe for the weekend than it is to spend. If you're going in from coming from Dumfries, you want to go and stay in Glasgow for 2 nights. I don't know why you would anymore, but you're better off just jumping on a plane, going somewhere warm, drinking nice cold, crisp craft beers by the seaside, and having good food with it.
Cool. Mark, we could blather this all day.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I have bare opinions. I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
I haven't even tried this.
We need to get you on for them. I'm going to bring in Andrew, and then if it's all right, and then you can hang around for a couple of minutes if you like, and then we'll say bye and all that sort of stuff. Is that all right?
No worries.
Here is Andrew. You're from Kirkcaldy, aren't you? So we get away with calling you our foreign correspondent.
I'm not actually from Kirkcaldy, even though the business is in Kirkcaldy. I'm in Rosyth, just outside Dunfermline.
Okay, so we can't call you a foreign correspondent.
Well, not that foreign, no.
we can walk to your house from here.
We absolutely. Yeah.
So I was telling Colin and Mark before we went to air that I wanted to get you on because you've been a guest on the show before, and it was a really, really awesome podcast. But also for anybody that doesn't know, Andrew has Kingdom Comics in Kirkcaldy, but he's also a beer aficionado. So we thought, and you posted something on Facebook last week that was like, I'm going to do a beer blog. I was like,
I've started a page on Facebook and invited anybody to put onto it. I've been doing these things called One Man Beer Festival during lockdown because what you talked about, we were just talking about there. You can't go out in the lash with your mates. You can't go out to a beer festival, whatever like that. So I've taken to just buying myself 10 random bottles of beer on a Saturday evening and sitting, you know, giving them a bit of a just grading them, and the grade gets better as the night goes on. I've got a 4 or a 5 at 7 o'clock. By the time I get to 11:45, it's like it's a 10. It's definitely a 10.
I went to a beer tasting in North Queensferry once. Our local brewery. It was years ago. I hate to say I forgot the name of the brewer at the time, but I remember he gave us a comments card to go with every beer. And I remember our first one, you see that the first couple of beers are like great notes of honey, and and then I actually remember my last card just had the word skid, so it's SGID.
So that's when they start selling you the Carling on your last couple of beers. Yeah, so you don't know the difference.
The cheap stuff.
Yeah. That's going back to what you were saying a few minutes ago. That's when 11:30 you start drinking Tennant's Lager or something like that, and going, this isn't that bad actually.
What have you been drinking this week, Mark? Andrew?
A couple of things. I've been really loving an Orkney brewer, and I've been drinking quite a bit of this Corn Creek. Orkney Brewery. At the moment, it's difficult because most of the shops that you would go to buy your craft ales either aren't open or are seriously curtailed. So you've got to kind of make do with what you can pick up in a local supermarket. And depending on the supermarket, sometimes they're not too bad at all. So the Corn Creek from the Orkney Brewery, which do a range of amazing beers, is what I've been sort of enjoying recently. And tonight I've picked up this one here. This is my other recommendation for the week.
What's that?
Birds and Bees.
Yeah.
From Williams Brothers. Again, calling itself a golden summer ale. Very light, easy on the palate. Yeah, I mean, for a long time, I was, as you described, I was a lager drinker who drank lager wherever I went. Lager. Occasional Guinness if I was in Dublin or something like that, but not a proper beer or something like that. And it's just, the last couple of years, I've gotten to appreciate a better, more taste, and to see things like Tennent's and Foster's for
what they truly are.
For what they truly are. Tasteless piss. But that's not what I'm going to say because,
all opinions are subjective.
Because it goes back to what you're saying about taste. Everyone's got their taste if you're brought up on Tennent's, if you're brought up on Carling, which fundamentally I think are the same thing, made by the same people. Just marketed.
I cannot comment.
Yeah. I think I'd always heard that Carling was basically in England and Tennent's was in Scotland, but they're made by the same people and it's fundamentally the same recipe.
I think at one point there was Carling brewed out of Tennent's brewery. I think that's where it was. I think it was brewed out of the same brewery as well. It's funny because geographically, there used to be huge issues getting beers around the country. So other brewers would subcontract out to each other. So you'd get Carling brewing Foster's and then or John Smith's on this end of the country, and then up at the John Smith's brewery they might be spitting out some Carling and whatnot. Not those exact same things, but there was a lot of that cross contractual stuff. And that's a lot of that's. It's a lot of craft beers as well do get made by the big brewers because you can go in and buy a brew time because they've got all the equipment. So you could go in. I think William Brothers actually might be out of Tennent's. Is possibly.
Yes, possibly.
Yeah. They won't say it on the label, but
are they not Williams Brothers? They're the big ones in that. Is it Birds and Bees? Is the one in Alloa, isn't it? The big place.
Yeah. They're brewing in Alloa. So
Alloa. Yeah.
That's
coming from Alloa.
Yeah. So there's little things where it may be brewed by a big brewer, but someone's come in and say, well, let's book this space and this time out of your kit because I can't invest in a big brewery. Let's book your out. So I don't see anything wrong with that, because technically you should be getting a more consistent beer as well, if you look at it that way.
I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong. The big brewers are going involved in the craft beer industry. It's become a multi-million pounds industry. They wouldn't be doing their shareholders a service or their own business if they thought, no, we're just sticking to what we do. They've got to try and get a piece of that pie, and that's okay because if it leads to more good beers out there, then
I think that's classic one. Beavertown, for example, they actually have the bar in Tottenham now, in the stadium. I think they're distributed by Heineken, and they wouldn't have got the Tottenham Stadium deal. Beavertown is still owned by Beavertown, but they're distributed around the UK by Heineken, and they wouldn't have been able to get into Tottenham Stadium unless they got that other contract to give them the scale to do those sort of things. Yeah. So there's benefits, and
it's good. It's interesting that you. I've kind of noticed a trend in tonight's beer chat where we're kind of talking about your palate and your it's good. It's interesting you bring up Beavertown, and then we've talked about Brewdog earlier tonight as well because there is a couple of beers. I always think of is it Gamma Ray that is it Gamma Ray the name of the Beavertown one? Did I get that right? Yeah.
Gamma Ray. Yeah. Gamma Ray.
Yeah.
Not Gamma Ray.
And then a Punk IPA. I think you're kind of, for me, your ideal. We've done a couple of we've done a couple of brew good or kind of beer crawly things in Dunfermline, and those are the two that I would sort of steer. Like some we've had some guys have come with us who are either comic friends or just friends that are like, oh, I want to take part, so it looks like you guys are having fun, but I don't know where to begin. And that's for me, those are your Punk IPAs and your Gamma Ray. Those are your gateway beers. You start there and then you can move into.
Yeah,
Punk's everywhere now, eh? That's the thing. You can get that in mainstream pubs all over the country.
Waterspoons.
You can get it in Wetherspoons. You can get it in a 4-pack in your local co-op or NISA or whatever like that. And it's a nice beer. It's a
totally. It's weird because in I find within like sort of craft beer world, it's quite underrated because it's recognised. It's sort of regarded not really as craft anymore, but it's actually a perfectly good beer.
Yeah. I remember I spoke about this the last time I was on. It was the Green Day effect. So I'm a massive Green Day fan.
Well,
and as soon as you become massively popular, you get accused by people in the industry of selling out, and you're no punk anymore. And punk are that exact thing. Because they're a big brewer now. They get
But if you look at their story, and again, I've got shares in these guys as well. I'm not an idiot. They came about by entering a Tesco beer competition. And then blagging, and then Tesco, I'm pretty sure this is it. Tesco said, right, you're a craft brewery, we'll take 10,000 cases. They didn't have a brew system. They had to go and blag their way to the bank manager and said, yeah, we've got this contract for this much. We can do it. We just need some more money to get the equipment. They blagged their way all the way through, and I think they were brewing out an innocent gun to start with. That first contract with Tesco is what hit them off. And then they got into, so Tesco and Wetherspoons sell more Brewdog than anywhere else in the country. So they've always been mainstream, so if you want to look at it that way. But as you say, it's a good beer. It's a good solid beer. You strip the label and the name away from it, and you put it side by side with a couple of other, I won't say substandard lagers. It will still come out in top and tastings, but as soon as you strip away a lot of the peripheral stuff, a lot of the branding and the glassware and the can, and you blind taste with people, at the end, people's true palates rarely come out. It's really incredible, and that's okay too. It's okay for people to buy into brands and what they believe those brands stand for, but you like what you like at the end of the day. It's all marketing and elements of bullshit.
I think there's a place for all beer. I like all beers. I do still like lager. I drink a lot of lager. Yeah. I drink Guinness. I drink John Smith's. I drink Belhaven Best. I drink fruity ciders during the summer. It really depends on what you're eating, what kind of mood you're in, where you are, what you're drinking, and more and more recently, like it's getting darker and slightly more bitter for flavour, which is kind of where I'm going. And that's probably just I think of age.
Yeah. But I think it's fantastic that people they're not set on one beer or else now, or one lager or one cider or whatever. People will drink for the occasion now, whereas they never used to, and that's got to be good, because it also affects, believe it or not, psychologically, it affects people's behaviours as well. So you won't see a bunch of lads on the town going into a craft beer place and being abusive or hitting on girls left, right, and centre, But you'll go into other pubs and that sort of behaviour is tolerated for what they're drinking and all sorts. The whole psychology behind it's fascinating. So in my book, the more diversity in beer, the better.
I think Colin saw it. There was a wee brief cameo by my freshly out of the bath wife in the bottom corner there of the screen for the eagle-eyed viewers among us.
just go to record.
We'll look back at this, mate.
What's the time? Timestamp is 9:08. Right.
I know that me and Colin are kind of chasing the clock a wee bit now. I don't know if that's an actual saying, but we're maybe going to wrap up in the next couple of minutes, guys. Is there anything anybody else wanted to talk about? I know, Colin, you were drinking what looked like a really interesting beer from a favourite of ours.
Oh, well, my beer tonight, yeah. I managed to pick up some Brewshed. So Brewshed is one of our local breweries in the little village of Lime Kilns. We visited them a year and a half ago. So this is promenade. Well, it tells you what it is there. Kind of fruity, coffee, something like 3.8% or something. And I can't remember if I'd actually had that one when we were visiting Stephen down at the Brewshed or not. But I picked it up in the local shop recently. Try it again. It's a very sessionable beer. Drink a few of them overnight. We'll try and get one down to you, Andrew, so you can try that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try it. Add it to add it to my list. I've got an app now. You've got Untapped, the app on your phone.
Oh yeah, we've had the Untapped chat.
Yeah.
I wanted to. I've got a new app on my phone that I can't wait until we can all start hanging out again together. Called where is it the beer? I don't know. I can't even find it on my phone to say it. The Fantasy Beer League is the app I want to try. Where you're supposed to bring a couple of a beer, so like a beer tasting, and it's done like a proper knockout tournament. But everybody does the blind marking on their phones. So
my god!
No, yeah, I know.
Sounds like when the world's a bit less crazy, perhaps.
How many levels are there?
I want a quick shout out. I'm drinking the Ferry Brewery in South Queensferry's. I picked this up from one of a local shop in Dunfermline. And they've got this beer. It's called Three Bridges, and it's obviously inspired by the three bridges in the Firth of Forth. And it's a hoppy IPA with 3 grains and 3 hops. Just really nice sessional beer. It was like, I'm trying to find the ABV. It was quite low, 4.5% ABV. Just totally like, I would £2 a can in a local corner shop. I'd quite happily buy 5 or 6 and just.
Yeah, I like beers. That's one of my favourite beers I've had since the start of the year. I really like the Three Bridges.
Absolutely.
Is that from the shop down at the Maygate? Is that open?
Oh no, this was from I think you can get this in the shop in the Maygate, but the Caledonia Crappy Merchant. But actually, there's a corner. It's a new corner shop in Tooch in Dunfermline. It's just it's a premier food shop, and the guy that owns it, I think he owns the one in Crossgates as well, and he just likes craft beer. So there's a very
it's going to be 10-minute walk from my house, so it's ideal.
Oh, it's amazing, man. You got there, Andrew. So you got the one in Tooke's got Ferry Brewing and Beef Brewing.
Yeah.
Also, a big shout out. I mentioned it last week. I can see the keg from here. There's a new shop which name escapes me on Appin. It's not a new shop, but there's a shop in Appin Crescent in Dunfermline, which is just along from where Dunfermline Athletic play football. It's where I used to go in there all the time with my son to get him like crisps and juice before we went into the stadium. He's now the guy that owns the place now. My cat.
Yay!
The guy that owns the place now is is a beer mate. It's called the big keg system that you can buy 5
things in.
That's all the shop sells. He sells that and these 5 litre kegs from Beef Brewing. It's great. Go in 20 quid and get yourself 5 litres of locally produced lager for 20 quid. It's great. The only other thing I wanted to talk about, and then the floor is open to anyone else before we call off. I wanted to Oh, sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to tell you what I was drinking. I mean, it's a little bit mainstream, but I thought I'd try it. It's the Burro Moretti, Galeni and Tishi. And it's actually quite... where are we?
8%.
8%, yeah. And it doesn't... I tell you what, it doesn't feel like 8%.
It's a big bottle as well.
Well, it does say for sharing on it. They've actually put a little sticker over the top to say for sharing. And I won't be doing that tonight. But it's really interesting actually because it doesn't feel like an 8%er, and it's quite a spicy malt going on there, which is interesting. So I can imagine it would go quite nice with a bloody it's a bit cliche, but maybe some pasta or a soft curry. I don't know. It's not bad.
That's amazing, man. Cool. Would there be a table if anyone's got anything as a plug? But the only thing I really wanted to talk about this week was I wanted to say a heads up to just because he was on the show last week. This stunning cover by Dan Cornwell is this week's 2000 AD cover. So. Yeah, we were really proud to have Dan on the show last week, and just a good bloke who's got his as he put it last week. It's a bucket list tick, isn't it, to get as an artist or a writer to have something in 2000 AD and news agents and stuff right now.
the only thing I was going to talk about, I thought I was coming on to talk about beer and comics. Obviously, I own a shop. So I thought I'd come on with a couple of recommendations, if that's okay.
Right, fire away.
Obviously, I'm not asking you to come to my comic shop. If you're from Kirkcaldy, come to me. If you're from Dunfermline, go to your local shop. At this point, always support your local guys. A couple of choices for this week. This is for the speculators out there, Spectre Inspectors. Start of the year, I'm putting this down as my book most likely to be picked up by Amazon or something like that. It's kind of a cross between Scooby-Doo, Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Veronica Mars. And Boom Studios and Image, occasionally you look at the things they put out and you think they're already thinking about, the adaptation rights and things. So I read that one today.
Previews a while ago, and I did think that looked quite interesting. I don't know what caught my eye. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing I'd normally buy, but for some reason it just caught my eye. Yeah,
it's a very simplistic art style. It's dead easy to read. It's aimed at maybe young adult type to sort of normal adults type thing. So I think that one's going to take off. Another one I want to talk about, one I want to mention is what can go wrong? It's Avengers Mech Strike. Basically, yes. The Avengers do Pacific Rim. It's massive tailors.
That's the best sentence I've ever heard.
Let's just get them all a mech suit and have them fight giant monsters.
Oh, mate, I would have loved that as a 10-year-old, eh? Oh, that would have been brilliant. Yeah, that's perfect.
Pacific Rim earlier on, it's no matter how bad the film might have been, or it was all a right film. It was a thing film. It's giant robots fighting giant monsters.
Yep.
What's not to love?
Yep.
And Avengers have obviously seen that market, and they've decided
there should be a toy line and a cartoon ready to roll right now.
Absolutely will be for this one.
Yeah,
I'm fairly sure the toys will already be in production.
So, is that issue 1 out now? Is that released this week number?
Both of these comics are released, yesterday, Wednesday. So
because Jeff wants it. That's right.
Yeah. I would just be glad if it was already on issue 2 and I'd missed out. That's amazing.
No, it's just today. If you message Albie, I'm sure you'll have a copy for you. If he doesn't, I'll sort you out with a copy of it.
So the conflict of being
go your local guy first.
the conflict of being friends with 2 comic shop owners.
That's you're from Dunfermline. I wouldn't expect you to come to me for your comics, no matter if I know you. Support your local guy. If you were from Kirkcaldy, I would say come to me. But
what about Colin? You got anything you wanted to bother about? You got anything you wanted comic wise?
No, not comic wise. Not this week. No, not at all. We did kind of mention WandaVision, when it first came out. You guys still watching it?
Yep.
Oh yeah, last week's episode.
Stoked by it all.
Yeah. Episode 4 was very much the episode that was like, right, we get it. You want to know what's going on?
Yeah, it was a payout, definitely.
I would. What's interesting about that, the reveal, which I won't spoil for you, Colin, is that everyone who's read the comics like, yeah, okay, yeah, cool, all right, we're getting on with it, and everyone else who hasn't read the comics like, oh my god, what just happened? They don't have that background or knowledge about sort of the characters and their history, So it was interesting. There was a lot of hate for the slow build, but that's what TV shows used to do. We're so used to instant gratification and binging a whole series now that I think a lot of people forgot that whole element. I thought it was done subtly and quite well to get to that point.
What's your predictions for the big? I saw, is it Elizabeth Olsen's the lady that plays Wanda? She said on social media this week that there is a
Skywalker.
There's a Mandalorian level cameo approaching that she's like really like she's struggling to keep under wraps.
I mean, there's some obvious choices. Yep, there we go. Yeah. I have a theory, but I've gotten to the point where I don't actually I want people to enjoy it, because anyone who's deep in the comics have pretty sound theories. One of them is that Mephisto's behind the whole thing, which I really hope that's not true, because I don't think that's been earned yet. If it is, I think if they did do something like that, maybe like a tiny Mephisto to be. I think what they're going to do, right? So you had Thanos, who was at the back of the first couple of years of the MCU. Kang has been announced to be in Ant-Man 3, right? And that might play into Stature and the Young Avengers, and that's my dog yelling at me. But I believe Kang might be the movie big bad over the next 10 years, and they might actually have a Disney Plus big bad. So they could have two levels going on there. That would be interesting, rather than the focus being on one big behind-the-scenes game-changing thing throughout the whole thread. So, again, and I really hope it's not Mephisto, and I'm pretty sure it won't be, but there's been a lot of rumours and mocked up mini-mates and toys that have been proven to be fake with Mephisto on it.
The one I heard that, I'm going to just say one more thing, and then I think I'm done chatting for tonight, because I know I've talked a lot. But one of the things I read this week that I got quite excited about, I don't think they're doing it, is that so WandaVision set, am I right in thinking based on what happened in episode 4, it's set about 4 weeks after the snap.
Yeah.
It
goes back to work.
Yeah. So it's set 6 months before Far From Home then? If you're thinking about it.
Maybe not. Because I don't think it really. But I don't think it matters. I mean,
so the reason why I mention it is my understanding is sort of chronologically, WandaVision's set between the events of Endgame and Far From Home, and then obviously the big reveal. Spoilers for anyone that's not seen it. The big reveal at the end of Far From Home was that Jonah Jameson exists in. So I've seen a wee bit of chatter on social media that actually the Spider-Verse exists within the MCU already.
Oh yeah.
Well, they've cast like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield and Charlie Cox and all sorts for the next Spider-Man movie. So and they think that the introduction of that's going to be Doctor Strange in the Mountains of Madness is where they're going to bring in the multiverse.
So so the elements of they're filming Doctor Strange right now. They've almost already finished filming on Spider-Man. So Wanda, and as we know, Wanda, it's not really a spoiler for comic book people. She can manipulate reality. And there is a potential spoiler. There's a rumor saying that the old Mandalorian reveal that might happen this week or the next week may have something to do with the multiverse. Do you want me to say it? I don't know.
I had a friend that I've got a friend who I've got an idea of what's coming. And my friend made me not speculate because he knows I read the comics. He was like, "That's a spoiler," and I was like, "It's not because I don't know what's going to happen. I just know what the comics."
I think I've got a solid speculation that you held that up, but I don't think it's going to be that that guy who turns up. It might be another that guy who turns up that leads us into Doctor Strange and.
Yeah, because there was another that guy who stole the show in the movie he was in. Is this what you're?
Yeah. I think that guy's that guy.
One. So like,
I know that's just a theory.
Okay.
That would be very cool.
And he was very good and had some of the best scenes in his movies. So,
absolutely.
Personally, I think there's a thing about Vision that's always been ignored, and the way I think they possibly are going is there's a character who's been teased but not actually came in. Who is an actor, and they cast Nathan Fillion to play him in posters in a movie. And in the comics, when Vision needed to come back, this character, you obviously know what I'm talking about, but you guys know this one?
No, I'm going to have to Google. I think
there's this character Simon Williams who goes by the pseudonym of Wonder Man.
Oh yeah, I know Wonder Man.
In the comics, he was the one who supplied the brainwaves for the Vision rather than Jarvis. And when they're having to bring him back, and they're going to need new brainwaves, possibly he's the one that they're going to bring in.
I
And
love
that's,
it.
that's why there's a lot of this series.
I hope they do. If they're going to bring in Wonder Man, I would really like them to do something similar to what they're doing at the moment with him in the comics, because he's a pacifist at the moment. So like, he's great, and he does stuff like they did a crossover event a couple of years ago where they needed him to use his powers to get away from evil dark elves, but he refused to fight. So they had him do things like knock bridges down so that to create gaps, and like so they're doing a car chase, and he was creating obstructions rather than performing violent acts, which was just really clever, I thought.
He's a good character, and he can be played so many ways. Like I loved him, like 80s cheesy Wonder Man when he was trying to be a sort of semi-failed actor. Was absolutely brilliant. He wore the 80s big shoulder pad suits and things like this.
No, it's all exciting. Can't wait for tomorrow for WandaVision.
Going back slightly, just to think, it's what you said about people aren't used to now waiting weeks, and I think another show that you talked about, The Mandalorian, kind of re-established that this is a better way of taking. You can't create a buzz when you drop 12 episodes at one, because everybody the following day, is on a different episode. When you do it a weekly, it creates, and this is what they're trying to bring back. So I think more and more Disney and things like this are going to go back to that weekly release.
Yeah. Hey, look, days coming where we're going to have a Marvel release every night of the week.
Yeah.
It'll be that and a Star Wars 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah.
Several this year alone we've got Falcon and Winter Soldier's coming, She-Hulk's coming, a new Punisher where they're keeping the same actor but rebooting the character is coming.
Can I just say a quick shout out? Lucy Sullivan, Bark. I don't know if you guys have talked about it, but she, there we go. This is a brilliant story. I just landed in my hands this week, and in between running a Kickstarter and having a good read. It's a fantastic book about mental health, and it's absolutely brilliant. I cannot give it a higher. I've lost my words with it because it's absolutely beautifully done. I think she's done it through charcoal paper as well, just the way it's all been drawn, and it is
beautiful.
Yeah. Oh wait there, but it's atmospheric and moody, and really does convey the tone and emotion of the subject. About some pretty dark stuff that people go through, and it's very well worth getting if you can get your hands on it. I think it's unbound, so I think it might be only available online or from Lucy Sullivan. So,
okay, shall have a look at that.
Yeah,
is that us?
We can talk about beer more, but
we could. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. It's been great. If people want to get a hold of you, is that the right Twitter handle? Thing?
Yep. So we've got Aroha Comics, arohacomics.com, Aroha at Aroha Comics Twitter, at Aroha Comics Instagram, Aroha Comics Mark Abnett on Facebook. Yeah, that's it. I'm even on TikTok.
Getting down with the kids and that.
I don't
next week we've got unless I can't count to 7. Next week we have the Beers Without Beards group. I think we're getting Emily Tassin in again, and I've asked her to bring friends. So that'll be really, really exciting. A phenomenal group based up in Scotland, advocacy for the drink culture and women in beer culture. So really, really awesome people, and really excited to see what they've got to say. Particularly last time we had Emily on, it was before lockdown. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm quite keen to talk to them about where they think things are going to go once things start to move into some sort of normality. So that's great. And I'm going to keep it under wraps until next week, but we've got we've managed to get this amazing run of guests. Obviously, we've had Marcus, which has been amazing. No, absolutely. Like I think we're smashing it in the park with guests just now. We've got a bit of a doozy in 2 weeks' time. I'm like totally like I told Colin, and I'm like, oh my god, like. We've got some really exciting guests coming up in the next like month or two, and we've got a biggie in 2 weeks. Obviously, we've got beers with a beard. It's a great name. I just struggle over it after I've had a.
The alliteration, it just gets away from you. Yeah.
It does. Also, we're going to have.
I'm getting better on this 8% actually.
I'm hoping that hopefully it's been really nice to have Andrew in, and we hope to get him in weekly, if not like regularly, just to chat about beers and comics and stuff. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
No problem.
Awesome.
Cheers.
It's been a pleasure as always. We'll see you again.
Hey.